Welcome to the channel. Listen to a very touching and true story about a poor girl. Seeing her husband's worried face, Alina immediately asked, "What's wrong, honey? Is there a problem on the farm?" Oleg sat down on the edge of the sofa and calmly, as if the troubles were usual for him, answered, "Yes, so I see something lately, and the cows somehow behave restlessly. Today it seemed as if wolves began to run around, although no one had seen them here for 20 years. I must speak to Mikhail about it so that he can round them up." When Alina heard the name of a hunter who was not respected in their village, she shook her hands. "Well, why would you mess with him? You'll only get yourself into more trouble. Among the locals about him walks such a rumor that the ear's in the tube. I beg you, Oleg, give up. Better our neighbor, Anton, ask him. He, though not a hunter, but perfectly knows the habits of wild animals." Looking at his wife, Oleg put his arm around her shoulders and said, "You think that this biologist will help me somehow? He is scared of a small mongrel dog, and there are wolves here. No, Alina, you need a professional here, and anyway, what's your way of advising me something that doesn't suit me in the first place? Okay, that's it. Let's have dinner, because I'm really hungry." Placing a bowl of rich borscht on the table in front of him, Alina continued to bend her line. "And yet, talk to Anton. Maybe he will advise you something sensible. Maybe there are not wolves at all, you know these cows." In the morning, getting ready for the farm, Oleg thought about it and decided to drop in on the biologist. The fact is that Anton worked as a school biology teacher. That is why Oleg abbreviated it to biologist. "Hello, neighbor, how are you? Are you still teaching kids how to learn? I always tell my kids that biology is the queen of all sciences, and without it you can't get into any university in the country nowadays. And I always tell kids that biology is the queen of all sciences, and without it nowhere, no one can enter any university in the country." Scratching the back of his head, as if he was scolded in front of the whole class, Oleg embarrassedly said, "Wow, you're really good. Listen, Anton, I have a job for you. My wife suggested that you could help me. At my farm, cows somehow behave strangely, not that much afraid of something, but clearly worried. Maybe they are sick, I do not know what." Anton looked attentively at Oleg. "It is interesting. Tell me more. What happened there? What is the reason for that?" Looking at his watch, the farmer asked, "And you're not late for class with the kids?" Anton answered calmly, "Yes, no, today I only have elective classes, but they will be after lunch." Raised his eyebrows, Oleg laughed. "So why did you take off in the morning? Did you miss school?" Anton shook his head and came closer and said quietly, "You could say that, but if you continue to laugh, you will lose the opportunity to get my help." Oleg had to slow down. Okay, that's not what I meant. I have a suspicion that wolves have appeared in our area, and I'd like you to take a look for yourself and give your verdict." The biologist waved at him and got into the car, uninvited. "Are we going, or are you just going to stand there?" Surprised whistled, Oleg plunged into the driver's seat. "Well, you're a fast guy, even I do not allow themselves such a thing. All right, buckle up, or else you might get blown away by the wind." The farmer dashingly pressed the gas pedal, and the car started off with a bang, rushing towards the farm. Both were silent as they drove, each thinking about something else. At last, when we have reached the gate of fence, Oleg has ordered, "We have arrived here, and we will walk further. By the way, you may now look around, in case you will find traces of uninvited animals." Anton did not answer and immediately rushed to the buildings where the cows were kept. For almost half an hour he scrupulously studied the ground beneath his feet. "I say, Oleg, wolves did not visit you, but if God forbid they came, they would not leave without prey." The farmer put his hands to his sides and asked angrily, "What does it mean, Anton? Do you think I'm completely crazy? Who's bothering my cows then, a demon or something?" The biologist with a clever look pointed to the ground near the barn. "Look, there's a barely visible boot print. Do you really think that wolves walk in shoes? No, it's a human footprint, only the size is very small, a child's footprint or a dwarf's footprint. In any case, a grown man's foot is much bigger. And if you don't believe me, compare it to your shoes." The farmer did indeed lift his foot. "That's true, my shoes are much bigger, but I still don't understand where a child would come from. After all, the farm is a long way from the village, and children do not come here. Well, let's go. I'll treat you to tea and cakes. My wife baked them, and I can't eat them all anyway. Sitting down at the table in his office, Anton spoke again about the trail he had found. I think it's just one of the local kids who came to see you on the farm. And if I have time, I'll be sure to ask my students about it. Maybe somebody was talking about the farm, or the outing. You know how it is. Kids get bored after school, so they find all sorts of adventures. Nodding in response, Oleg said, I completely agree with you. I was a restless child myself. My parents were looking for me all over the village. But I still do not understand how you can scare my cows. I remember how Alina used to bring her nephews to the farm, and not a single cow moved. No, Anton, it's not just the trail you found. The cows won't just worry, there's definitely someone bothering them. Slamming his palm on the table, the biologist immediately said, I almost forgot. I noticed a cot in your barn where the hay is stored. And if you still think it's wolves, they seem to sleep with your cows sometimes. Not believing his ears, Oleg, just in case, looked into the neighboring barn. Wow, it really is a bed. I wonder who could set it up. Well, not wolves, really. In the far corner of the room really was something like a lion, mounded round straw and disheveled headboard in the form of a pillow. Anton, who was standing nearby, said cautiously, Well, I don't know what it could be, but clearly not a wild animal. He would not lie quietly on the straw. Believe me, the predator would certainly satisfy his hunger. Oleg slightly alerted. What is true is true. Well, what do you say? How do we act further? Anton raised his eyebrows in surprise. In what sense? You really think that I will settle on your farm and will protect it? In response, Oleg patted him on the shoulder and said, No, I don't need to guard anyone here. I have a guard for that. He is sitting in a booth by the fence. Let's go and get acquainted. A middle-aged man came out of a small wooden building to meet them. Greetings, Oleg Ivanovich. How did you make the rounds? Holding out his hand, the man said, Meet Anton, our biology teacher, and also a great expert on wild animals. However, he claims that there is no smell of wolves here. Turning his head toward him, the watchman said, I'm glad to see an educated man in front of me. My name is Dmitri. And as for the predators, you're right, there really weren't any. At least I haven't met any, though I've been working here for a long time. With a shrug of his shoulder, Oleg returned to the conversation. Well, if there are no wolves, then it is more quiet for us, isn't it, Anton Vasilievich? Returning to the car, he almost whispered, Could be without patronymic, we are the same age. As for wolves, which you imagined, they really were not here. We saw footprints, but they belonged to a man, or rather a child. And that's something to think about. Maybe it's the local kids who are fooling around. And if that's the case, I have to make sure they don't come here again. I don't want your watchmen to get them mixed up with thieves and assault them with a shotgun. An hour later they returned to the village and Oleg, not to drive back and forth twice, took Anton to school. Then he came home and told his wife everything he had seen on the farm. Filling his cup with tea, she said thoughtfully, If it's not wolves misbehaving, it's definitely children. But why would they go there, especially at a time like this? Outside the window just went a light snow and Oleg, looking at it, nodded and mouthed, That's it, that it is winter, and they do not care, even the harsh cold. You know how I feel about my cows, so I am worried. Alina hugged her husband and said, Stop worrying about it, dear. You've already realized that they are not wolves, and that the children are playing, so they still do the cows no harm. Oleg nodded in agreement. All right, let it be so, but I still asked the biologist that he with them has an educational conversation. There is a watchman on the farm. What if he gets something mixed up? I don't want any problems, especially with the law. At this point, they stopped talking about the farm and sat down at the table. Alina had prepared a delicious pilaf. Scooping rice and meat with a spoon, Oleg still continued to think about something. This alerted his wife, and she gently asked, Well, now what worries your clever head? Looking out the window, where darkness had already thickened, Oleg said, Still, I have to go there again to see for myself what's going on there. And I'll check on the guard, see if he's asleep. I'll give him a hard time. Alina sadly remarked, Oleg, have you looked at the clock? It is almost 9 p.m. Did you decide to spend the night there? Her husband looked at her pitifully, and this even made his wife's heart ache. Well, Go to your cows, put them to bed, and wish them good night. But do not be too long because the frost is getting colder." Warmly dressed, Oleg quickly warmed up the car and rushed to the farm. The guard met the farmer in a cheerful mood. "Wow, Oleg Ivanovich, at this late hour and here on the farm, did you forget something? By the way, all the workers, as we agreed, I let them go early." Nodding in response, Oleg went to the barn, where in the afternoon together with the biologist found a cot. Oleg turned on the light and cautiously walked to the end of the barn. He immediately realized that there was someone in the place he had found earlier because the hay was not lying as it was. "Hey, who's there? Come out." Some movement was heard in the distance, but there was no response. "Well, for sure a mongrel is spending the night. Well, let him get warm," thought Oleg. But on his way out, the farmer suddenly heard a child crying. He rushed to the pile of hay and started frantically scattering it, just like a child. The little girl was shaking from the cold and was crying profusely, covering her face with her little hands. Picking up the little girl in his arms, Oleg covered her jacket and ran to the warm gatehouse. "Dimmer, take guests, but quickly, and the child is completely stiff." Covering the poor girl with a blanket and pouring a mug of hot tea, the watchman asked the girl, "Lord, where are you from and how did you end up on the farm?" The little girl answered in a voice shaking with cold, "Sirs, don't throw me out. I don't want to go back to my mother." After heating and feeding the child, Oleg and Dimmer still found out that the girl's mother likes to drink heavily. And when she was drunk, she used to chase the girl around the house instead of the devils and smashed everything around. Not only that, she would bring strange men and continue her drunken escapades with them. The house was always cold and there was no food, so the little girl went wherever she could see. She stumbled upon a farm and stayed the night in the hay barn. So she started coming here while her house was drunk, and in the morning she ran home, making her way through her mother's guests sleeping on the floor. If there was anything left on the table from last night's revelry, the girl finished it, but that was rarely the case because the guests ate all the snacks clean. Oleg and his keeper listened to the shocking story that gave them goosebumps. They could not imagine that the child was treated in such a way by his own mother. Leaving the girl with a guard, Oleg started the car and went to the address that she called. It turned out that the poor girl lived in the next village, 2 kilometers from the farm. How did she have the strength to come here? Oleg thought about it all the way, and when he drove up to the right house, he almost fainted. Outside the house looked very deplorable. In the yard lay old things and junk, and the porch has long been bent from old age. He pushed open the door, which was barely closed, and went inside the house. The smell of stale liquor immediately hit his nose. Looking into the kitchen, Oleg almost tripped over the landlady. She was lying on the floor and muttering something under her nose, and in the next room, a man was lying beside the bed. But whether he was the father of that girl, the farmer did not yet know. And to clarify the situation, Oleg brought a bucket of ice-cold water from the well and drenched them both from head to toe. Instantly, they were sobered up. "What are you doing, you bastard, and how did you get in the house?" Oleg had no desire to answer their stupid questions, and so he asked himself, "Where is your daughter? And what is her name?" He did not even know the girl's name in a hurry. The mistress sat down on the floor and, barely opening her mouth, grumbled, "Our Tanya must be out walking, and when she comes, I'll put her in the corner. She has completely lost control of herself." "I see, so the found girl's name was Antonina," and Oleg clenched his fists in anger and said, "I will ask you for everything, but in the meantime I need to visit someone else." Without any delay, he started the car again and soon raced back to the village. But he did not go to his house, but went straight to the biologist. He did not immediately understand what the farmer wanted. Wow, a baby in this cold. She could freeze to death. Nodding in response, the farmer almost shouted, "That's what I'm telling you. Hurry up and get dressed and let's go. You'll see for yourself." Oleg dropped Anton off at the farm and pointed to the keeper's house. "Come and get acquainted. Maybe you'll guess why I pulled you out of the house in such darkness." Anton opened the door and went inside. Seeing the girl, he immediately said, "Tanya?" "No way." But the little girl was sleeping sweetly, wrapped in a blanket in front of the warm stove. Understanding that this was not the time for questioning, Anton got out and headed for the car. After he sat down on the seat, Oleg turned to him and with all the anger he uttered, And now let's go to where she came from. Only please do not faint." The farmer drove on as fast as he could, ignoring the bumps and potholes. At last, when they stopped, Anton ran into the house without any further ado and could hardly stand on his feet lest he fall down from the heavy smell. The owners were still lying on the floor, but the girl's mother was the first to wake up. "Get out of here, this is our house." Anton came closer and tears gushed from his eyes. "How can you live like this? And your daughter?" She almost froze to death. But his words seemed to be getting out of hand. And then the farmer got involved in the business of finding out all the circumstances. "Come on, you damn drunks, confess who threw the child out in the cold." Pulling them both into one room, Oleg sat down on an old stool and, putting his foot up by the heel, continued. "Why are you silent? You think that I will leave? No, you parasites, I'll beat the hell out of you." Anton wanted to interfere, but the farmer looked at him threateningly, gritting his teeth, said, "Better call our district officer that he came here. Then you go to the farm and pick up the girl. Take her to my house. I will warn Alina on the phone. I left the keys in the car, then you figure it out yourself." After completing his orders, Anton waited for the district police officer, who drew up a report and then got into his car to go get the girl. Lingering at the door, the policeman looked at Oleg and said, "Just make sure you do it without traces, or you'll be in trouble with the law." The next day, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with the news of what the farmer had done to those unfortunate parents. No one could have imagined that he would do such a thing. Oleg put both of them on a chain and forced them to work on the farm, all so that they would realize the extent of their guilt. But it did not last long, because soon officials from the district came to the village, and with them the very champions of legal human rights. We had to release the slackers, or else Oleg would have been dragged through the courts. But at the same time, the girl from this family was taken away. They wanted to put her in an orphanage, but Anton persuaded them to give Tonia to his care. The custody officials met him halfway and kept the girl for the duration of the proceedings. As for those drunkards, they were soon deprived of their parental rights. And here, without thinking twice, Anton officially filed for custody. A month later, through a special procedure, his request was approved. Now Tonia lives at his home, where she is taken care of by her grandmother, Anton's mother. By the way, she has not forgotten how the farmer saved her that frosty night and gave her rescuer a picture. On it, the girl depicted Oleg in the company of his favorite cows. He thanked Tonia for the gift and promised to take her to the farm more often in the summer.